Hello and welcome again to Credit Versio's Q&A Wednesday live for May 11th. I am your host, David Michalek, and every week at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, we all come together live on Facebook and YouTube to talk about credit. And as a consumer credit expert with nearly a decade of experience, I've conducted over 10,000 one-on-one credit coaching sessions, and I'm very much looking forward to helping you understand and improve your credit. Joining us today again is America's #1 credit expert. He has 30 years of experience in the credit industry, including years working for both FICO and Equifax. So I'm going to bring him in with his intro video, and then we're going to get right.
John Ulzheimer is America's most recognized credit expert. With 30 years of experience in the credit industry, having worked for both FICO and Equifax, he's the go-to authority for answers to credit questions. Here to answer your credit questions, Credit Versio presents John Ulzheimer.
John, welcome back. Good to have you again.
Thank you for having me again.
My pleasure. And today's a special day. You know, one of the things that I love about our lives is that we get to really dissect things that come across our desk. And today is special. Because, and we'll examine this a little bit, and this is going to be a treat for our viewers, it's always exciting when there might be a new credit hack on the horizon. Something amazing, something incredible, something that's going to, it's going to be 800 credit scores for everybody. So this is making the rounds. I did a lot of research on this today, put together a little video to talk about this credit hack, and then once we play the video, John, we're gonna dissect this, okay? Here we go.
I can't wait to see this. I can't wait to see this.
Here we go.
I'm going to give you a quick credit tip, okay? It's called the 15 and 3 rule.
Started applying this 15-3 rule that I learned.
Do you want to raise your credit score? Using the 15-3 rule will definitely help.
Did you know about the 15-3 rule?
What's that?
The 15-3 rule is whenever you make 2 payments on your credit card each month.
I started making 2 payments on my credit cards. One 15 days before the due date, and the other 3 days before the due date.
This will show 2 on-time payments. This will increase your score.
And what it does, it's supposed to raise your credit score significantly, if I can say that word.
One payment should be 15 days before the credit's due, and the second payment should be 3 days before it's due.
I finally got my credit score over 750. Over 750.
I hope this helps save you money, and follow for more.
All right, John, is this the one? Are we? Is it 800 credit scores for all of us now?
Yeah, I was waiting for the guy in the Lamborghini parking in front of a mansion. We got close. The dude who was all blinged out. We got close, but
I know he had the Apple Watch and he had a bejeweled Rolex. Maybe, I don't know. Could have been. I'm not saying it was like a cheap knockoff, but he definitely had a look about him. He definitely had a style.
800 scores for everybody. All right.
800 scores for everybody.
I'm almost embarrassed to be talking about this. So I'm going to need a shower after today's discussion.
Hey, listen, this is a public service that we are obliged to perform for the greater good of the general public and their desire for better credit. So I'm
feeling the scum slowly growing on my arm right now. All right, so let me tell everyone.
Let's break this down. Let's talk about this.
Let's break it down. All right, so why are we talking about this? Probably a lot of the people watching have never even heard of all that stuff that you just saw. So earlier this week, I got a request from a reporter that I've known since back when he was with the Chicago Tribune, and he was writing an article about this credit hack that he had discovered and was able to find all these TikTok videos and YouTube videos and some print not print, but print online print articles, blogs, I guess, about this 15-3 rule. And so he sent me a message asking me a bunch of questions about it, trying to see if this is a real thing. If it is real, why is it real? Why does it work? Does it work? Is it bogus? What is it? Tell me everything there is to know about it. So I And in all honesty, I had never heard of it before earlier this week, which is probably a good thing. So anywho, I did a little bit of research into it. So a lot of the videos that you just took clips from, I actually watched all those and I read all the print articles. And so here's the theory that is going on here. So there's a couple things that are at play here. So number one is, first off, because I'm talking about it, please don't suggest that I'm giving this any sort of credibility just because I'm talking about it. I'm just talking about it. But my intent is not to give this any credibility whatsoever. In fact, my intent is to do the exact opposite than that. So please don't try to say John Ulzheimer was talking about this thing. It's going to make it sound like that I'm giving it kind of, life and legs, and I'm actually trying to kill it. So, all right, so here's the deal. So this 15.3 novelty, I guess is what we'll call it, is a suggestion. And I don't know who thought of it. I don't know where it came from or what person kind of came up with it, but it's taken on a life of its own and it's got some momentum. So that's why we're talking about it. So here's what it is. The theory is that if you, on a credit card account, if you make and it depends on which video you watch because you'll see that they're very inconsistent with the wording. The theory is if you make a payment on your credit card bill 15 days before the due date and then make another payment on your credit card bill 3 days from the due date, that somehow that will show up on your credit report as 2 on-time payments instead of 1, and therefore help your credit score more because it's 2 on-time payments instead of 1 on-time payment. And it's supposed to help your credit score because it will lower your utilization ratio and your credit score will go up. And if you believe what you just saw, then it will help your score tons, right? It'll flip the switch and your credit score will fly through the roof. All right. Other videos or other articles that cover this novelty suggest that if you make a payment on your credit card 15 days before the statement closing date, and then another payment on your credit card 3 days before the statement closing date, that all of those things that I just said will happen. So there's a little bit of a conflict in terminology: due date versus the statement closing date. So the due date is the day that is 21 days after you get your statement. All right, so you get your statement, and because of the Card Act, you have the right to 21 days, at least a 21-day grace period. That day that is at the end of that 21-day grace period is called the due date. So a payment of some variety is due by that date. The statement closing date is the day that occurs 21 days prior to your due date. That's the end of the 30-day billing cycle for your credit card account, where all of your transactions and payments and credits and fees and interest, that's where all that math occurs, and that's what yields your statement balance. And credit card issuers furnish that information to the credit bureaus after your statement closing date, and that's what balance shows up on your credit report. So if you had $1,000 of purchases, $500 of payments, and nothing else, then you would have a $500 balance on your next statement, because that's how the math works out. So let's kill the first one, because that's an easy one to kill. But it doesn't matter if you make your payments 15 days before the due date and then 3 days before the due date, because the balance has already been reported to the credit bureau. So you're not lowering that balance by making these payments after the statement has been cut, but before your due date. You can make a payment every single day, 21 days in a row, or one payment sometime during that 21-day period, and your credit report is still not going to show a zero balance, because the balance has already been reported prior to you making any sort of payment. All right. Number two is there's nowhere on a credit report to indicate that you made 2 on-time payments in 1 month. It just simply doesn't exist. So whatever person thought of, hey, maybe because you make 2 payments, it's going to show up as 2 on-time payments. Whoever made that up did exactly that. They made it up. All right. So back to the other scenario. What is it? Even a blind squirrel finds a nut, and even a broken watch is correct twice a day. That's kind of a little bit of what's happening with the other one, which is the 15 and 3 relative to the statement closing date rather than the due date. If you make payments before your statement has been generated, then obviously the balance on your statement is going to be lower, right? Because you have this 30-day period where you're making charges. You can also make payments during that 30-day period. You don't have to wait till you get your statement to make payments on your credit card account. You can log in right now and make a $10 payment. They don't prohibit you from making payments on your credit card at any time of the month. So their theory is that if you make a payment 15 days before your statement closing date and then another one 3 days before your statement closing date, that's going to show up as 2 on-time payments. That's not correct, because technically those aren't really payments yet. Payments occur after the statement has been cut and before the due date. So that's what shows up on a credit report, whether or not you made the payment before the due date. If you have a $1,000 balance before the statement is generated and you make a $500 payment, you're going to get a statement that shows that you have a $500 balance, and you're still going to have to make a payment on that particular balance. If you ignore that, you're going to have a late payment eventually on your credit report, because you just went delinquent. You just went delinquent on a smaller amount because you made a payment before the statement has been closed. So first off, any suggestion that it shows up as more than one on-time payment that's a lie, right? And it takes a lot for me to say that. Yeah, I get it. Sometimes people make honest mistakes. That's straight up a lie. That's not true at all. And anyone wants to argue with me, I'm here every freaking Wednesday, bro. I'm glad to take the heat. The second part about the 15 and 3 and the making the payments and the lower balance, again, even a broken watch is correct twice a day. But the 15 and 3 is irrelevant. You can make a payment on day 10 in day 3. You can make a payment on day 17 in day 3. That doesn't matter, as long as the payments are made prior to your statement being cut. That's the relevant issue. You can make one gigantic payment the day before you get your statement, and if you pay it in full, then your statement is going to be 0, and on your credit report, the balance is going to be 0, and your utilization ratio is probably going to go down. It may go down a lot, and your score may go up as a result. The only reason your score went up is because your utilization ratio went down. I've talked about this probably number one with you on these Facebook Lives, number 2 on the videos that I record for you, and maybe number 3 on even articles that I've written.
We've covered this stuff ad nauseum.
Ad nauseum. And I've called this a number of times the ethical credit score hack, because what you're doing is you're making your payments before the statement is cut, and therefore it yields a lower balance on a credit report, which means your utilization ratio is going to be lower, and therefore your score is going to go higher. No one in their right mind would say that's a trick or a black hat credit score hack. Or that's just timing your payments in such a way that the balance on your credit report is different. There's no requirement that you wait till you get your statement to make a payment. That's a fabrication. So that's what this 15 and 3 thing is. It's interesting. About half of the people that I'm connected with in social media had never heard of it. And the other half of the people were like, yeah, it's bogus. I'm not sure what they mean. And everyone knows that the credit bureaus only report once a month, and you can lower your balance by paying before the statement closing date. So anyway, that's it. I wanted to, if anyone watching, because I know you may be in the credit repair frame of mind, but just keep in mind that there is no validity to any of that baloney, and you probably should consider the source before you start believing the things that you're hearing. Yeah. And if you want to make a payment on your credit card bill and lower your balance and therefore lower your utilization, go for it. To the extent that any of those companies are credit repair companies, and to the extent that they're using that to convince people to sign up for their services, I think the Federal Trade Commission would call that deceptive marketing. Why am I saying that? Because earlier this week, they slammed a credit repair company, and the number one thing on the list in the lawsuit, among a variety of things, was deceptive marketing. So if you lie to consumers, you're a lousy business, and B, when the Federal Trade Commission comes a knocking, that's not the neighbor you want to come a knocking. I can assure you of that.
That's all bad news. Yeah,
just all bad news. And if you ever hear stuff like that, we're, like I said, David and I are on these things every Wednesday. Pop them in the question section. We love hearing about these novelties. And look, when I say novelty, This isn't the first time we've heard of something like this, and it's certainly not going to be the last time. There was the 609 dispute letter, which is a joke. There's the credit sweep, which is illegal because it involves you filing false police reports to try to get stuff off your credit reports under the fake. I've been the fake victim of fraud.
Did you hear of? I remember this was a big thing, the credit sweep, when I first got into this industry, 2012, 2013. I remember there were some guys, I want to say they were either in, I can't remember if they were in Washington or Oregon, but one of those states would allow you to file a police report online. It's like one of the very, very few police departments that would allow. So these guys figured out, like, hey, I can file these police reports for my clients. And a bunch of those, and they did that for years, a bunch of those guys went to jail. And a handful of their clients, I don't know how they parsed that out, like, okay, who's going to serve time and who's not. But some of the people that used that service actually did some time. So that really stuck with me. When you say credit sweep, that's what I remember from 2012, maybe 2013.
There was actually a police officer, and I think he was in either South Carolina or maybe Tennessee. It was one of the southeastern states. And he was wrapped up with some credit repair company, and they were paying him, and he was helping them file false police reports. And it was just this whole mess. And he got nailed, and I don't know if he had to serve time. I suspect he probably lost his job.
I would imagine.
Ultimately, you have to live with your decisions, and if you can honestly look yourself in the mirror and say, yes, what I'm about to do is entirely legitimate, and then then fine. I hope you're comfortable with your decision. But I'm just telling you that everything's all fine and dandy until you run afoul of the CFPB or the Federal Trade Commission, and then you've got problems.
Yeah, then it becomes. I'm getting a note that. Yeah, Kelly, thank you for the heads up. I've got the echo cancellation on, so I'm not exactly sure why it's doing that.
I think Kelly's watching. I think Kelly's watching on a flip phone. That might have something.
That would make it easy, but is anybody else experiencing that? I don't know what I could do, because I do have all the settings on there, right? But John, just talking about when I saw that post on your Facebook page about this. What's this? I've already forgotten it. 15-3 rule, whatever it is. It's not going to stick. Yeah.
Hopefully we'll all forget about it after today.
Yeah. Well, it'll probably be one of those things like when we did that Metro 2 compliance letter video, which, by the way, is getting more and more and more popular, because I think people are like, oh, let's listen to some experts rather than just being in that credit repair echo chamber and just listening to everybody. But so one thing I did notice is that when you posted that, a lot of people who look at that are probably in the credit repair space, probably know you from the credit cons, and like me, they're like, I've never heard of this. I don't know what this is, and it seemed like the sentiment going down, reading the comments, everybody's like, yeah, why is this even a discussion? This is complete. Yeah. This is complete nonsense. But if you look at the source, like you said, the source is TikTok, YouTube, places where people are, I don't know if they have a business or they don't have a business, but so I think I would hope that legitimate credit repair companies or people in the consulting space, whether they're for-profit, nonprofit, are looking at this and just giving it a wide berth, because this is trouble all day long.
Do you remember a few years ago when there were a bunch of, I don't know if videos or the theory a few years ago is if you opted out, that your score would go up, and it would go up like 5. Like there was a very exact figure that your score would go up like 5 points or 7 points. And for those of you who don't know, that was also kind of I don't know that it was a scam. I don't think people were trying to sell a service that would opt you out, but opting out is the process whereby you would essentially order the credit reporting agencies to stop selling your credit report for pre-screening, meaning the credit card solicitations that you get in the mail. That's all a result of pre-screening. And you can actually, if you when y'all get home from work today and you check your mail, if you have any credit card offers in the mail, if you flip them over and read the fine print on the back, you'll notice that there's language that kind of gives you instructions on how to opt out of those types of offers. And that's a right that you have per the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And if you want to reduce the amount of junk mail you get, then opting out is a pretty good way to do it. And somehow there is a ton of videos that probably similar to some of the junk that you saw here from people that are like, hey, I got 4 seconds, I'm making a video, subscribe to my channel. And they would, and basically it was, hey, my score went up 5 points after I opted out, and boom, it like caught fire, and all these little basement vermin were recording similar videos about how, and so it's funny. It's funny how the amount of arguments that I get in about these things, and people are like, well, how do you know it's not true? It's almost like you're trying to prove the negative. It's like some dude in his basement says it now. Someone's screaming at me to prove that it's not true. So in that one, it was actually pretty simple because there's no scorable field on a credit report that has anything to do with whether or not you're opting out. And the only thing that opting out prevents from happening is it prevents soft inquiries from ending up on your credit reports, because when your credit report is sold to a credit card issuer or a home equity lender and they're soliciting to you, there is an inquiry that's posted, but it's a soft inquiry. So really the only thing that you're doing when you opt out is you're preventing soft inquiries from hitting the credit report. They're meaningless to credit scores. And so by preventing those from hitting your credit report, you're not helping your credit scores because they're not scored anyways. They're not influential anyways. You know what it is, David? I'm waiting for someone to throw a video up and say, hey, I got it. I've hacked the system, 800 credit scores for everybody. I'm going to write all my dispute letters in crayon with my left hand. And they may say, my deletion rate went up by 4%. So there has to be something about writing dispute letters in crayon with your left hand. And they're trying to, and some of these other novelty dispute letters that we've been talking about are similar, where all of a sudden something happens and, oh my gosh, there must be a correlation between the two. And they forget that it's probably the other C word, which is coincidence. Meaning that, like, if you flip a coin 50 times, statistically, it's supposed to be 50 heads and 50 tails, but it'll never be 50 heads and 50 tails. I defy anybody to ever flip a coin 100 times and it be exactly 50 heads and 50 tails. So it just because you do something a certain way, what if the stamp on an envelope dispute letter and I put the stamp sideways instead of oriented straight? What if I put it upside down? And that yields more 2% increase of deletions. Does it have anything to do with the stamp? Of course not. That's a coincidence. There's no correlation between the two. So I think that's important for people to keep in mind, is that correlation and coincidence are very, very different things. And to be careful if they are spending money on things that are simply coincidences rather than actual correlations.
Yeah, it's kind of a loose explanation of what's referred to as the Anthropic Principle, where when something happens to you, you don't have the ability to consider all the other things that didn't work out for other people. Like the example that's given is, looking down, getting the winning lottery ticket and being somebody who is a believer in the lottery. Like, hey, this is verification that people do win the lottery and this is a real thing. But yet you forget about the millions of lottery tickets that are in trash cans or going down the gutter and that are in people's ashtray in their car or whatever, if cars still have ashtrays. And it's the same thing with the credit repair. Like one of the things that I had to do with the using this as a great example, the Metro 2 compliance video that we did. Well, credit repair does have kind of this cult following, because there's such an absence of real fact that people they'll want to believe something and they'll hang on to that belief because there's nothing really to discount it or even really to verify it apart from what they see. So one of the things that I had to do on the Metro 2 video that we did is I had to turn the comments off, because and I made a little disclaimer. I said, listen, the comments have been intentionally disabled to prevent the spread of factually inaccurate posts and opinions on this subject. So I made it very well known, and I did it all in caps so people understand that we're not going to entertain any nonsense, because this is factual information that's being discussed by two people who come from the industry that worked in dispute resolution. Why do we care about your opinion? It's all right. Everything you need to know is right here anyway. So, and then, but I would get these comments like, well, explain my results. Well, I don't have to explain your results. But like you said, it could have just been a coincidence. There's 100 reasons why you got the results that you did. The fact that it was this method of dispute had nothing to do with anything any more than writing in crayon with your left hand might have gotten you the same results.
That's right. Every time you communicate with a credit reporting agency, there's a possibility that something is going to happen, either for the good or for the bad. You know what I'm going to do? So you notice that in the comment section, there's a woman named Kelly Wells who has commented a couple times, and I joked about her flip phone. She and I are friends, and so it's not like I'm attacking one of your viewers. I know Kelly very well. And
hey, if you have a flip phone, you should be attacked.
That's right. So anywho, Kelly earlier, and I hope I'm okay saying this. So earlier this week, Kelly sent me a text message with a picture of a credit alert that came from one of the 3 credit reports. I'm not going to get into a ton of detail, but the credit alert it changes to your credit report information, and you get an alert letting you know, hey, that something has changed on a credit report. So there's tons of services that do a lot of the identity theft protection monitoring services do things like that. Well, the alert that she showed me, the thing that had changed on the consumer's credit report was the consumer's address. And the address had been updated or changed, and the address was the same address of the corporate headquarters of the credit reporting agency that sent the alert.
Oh, interesting.
So let's say that the credit bureau was at 123 Main Street, and that was their corporate headquarters. It gave an alert that the address on this particular consumer's credit file had changed to 123 Main Street, which is preposterous, of course, because it's a corporate address. It's the same address as the credit bureau, and the consumer clearly doesn't live there. So like I said, every time you interact with a credit bureau, doesn't matter how it occurs, whether you apply for credit and the lender goes in on your behalf, whether you opt out, whether you pull a credit report through annualcreditreport.com, whether you buy a service from one of their consumer services, one of their consumer services products, whether you file a dispute, whether you hire a CRO to file a dispute, anytime you have an interaction with a credit bureau, there is going to be a reaction, whatever that reaction happens to be. Yeah. And you're right. People who deal with credit bureaus because they want to get something corrected, they're looking for anything that validates their efforts and want to ascribe an explanation as to why something occurred. I have no idea why the credit bureau arbitrarily threw their corporate address on a consumer's credit report as the current address. I have no clue. Clearly that's incorrect and should be corrected if in fact it is on someone's credit report. So I think that's the important thing to keep in mind, is that it's not as simple as saying, oh, because this letter is in this particular format, or was folded a certain way, or was faxed instead of mailed, or was hand delivered, or was sent through return receipt requested certified mail versus the good old fashioned cheap mail, that something different happened, and you're trying to correlate the two things, is you have no idea if that had any influence at all in the outcome that you achieved. So if you think of a funnel, right? And all of the letters and communications about credit reports, whether they're credit repair disputes or disputes that some consumer filed because they see something that they think is wrong, and they write a letter to the credit bureau. The CFPB says that happens 8 million times a year, so it's not like it doesn't happen very often. And so all these dispute communications go into the top of this funnel, okay? And there's that particular part of the process is where the overwhelming majority of consumers and unfortunately credit repair companies, they have no idea what happens after that occurs. Yeah. All they know how to do is send a letter. That's all they know how to do. They don't know how to do anything else. They send a letter, and they don't know what happens once that letter is sent or the dispute is filed online. So I'm going to tell you what happens when that communication is received, whether it's a letter, a fax, a phone call, an in-person visit, an online filing of a dispute, doesn't matter. All of those disputes are homogenized into a code, a 3-digit dispute code. 001, 002, 103, 02, whatever. There's almost 36 of those codes. It doesn't matter if your letter is written in crayon. It doesn't matter if your letter is a Metro 2 format or whatever they're being called. It doesn't matter if it's a 609 dispute letter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. What matters is that whoever gets that letter, whether it's a machine, OCR, or if it's a human being in the United States, or if it's a human being in another country, they're going to take that letter, they're going to convert it into a code. At that point, that letter is irrelevant, entirely irrelevant, because it is attached to the dispute form, which is the actual work order that is now going to kind of work its way through the system, and it's sent to the furnisher. The furnisher is going to look at the dispute code. They have to open the letter because it's a systemic requirement. Whether or not they read it and consider it, some of these letters are dozens of pages long. I don't think that they're going to sit there and read the entire thing. They may, but it just seems less likely than if it's a 1 or 2 page letter. And if it's written in gibberish, which I've read some of these letters that are, it's almost like people are trying to write in horrible grammar on purpose. And then the furnisher is going to perform an investigation, which generally means that they're going to check their internal systems. They may go external. They may speak to their peers. They may run it up the food chain if they need like a managerial assistance. If it's a specialty dispute like a fraud, they'll probably send it to the fraud department, who has a completely different set of policies that they're going to follow. And then after some period of time, they're going to respond to that particular dispute form and send it back to the credit bureau. At this point, the letter is irrelevant. It doesn't matter what format the letter was, or whether it was folded one way, or if it was written in crayon or whatever. And then the credit bureau is going to do the work associated with the work order, meaning they're either going to delete it, modify it, or leave it as is, and then they're going to send the consumer an updated copy of their credit report with the investigation results. That's their obligation. So again, I think that because there is no other process, that's the way it happens. That's where people kind of get into this. Let's send 100 different types of letters, and whichever one yields the best results, there must be a correlation. And the reality is that it's coincidence, and there is no correlation.
Yeah. I remember an early conversation that I had with our mutual friend Steve Rieger, who has been on with us before. He's been on with me a couple of times. When I was at the company before Credit Versio, which was a white glove full service credit repair company. I mean, we had these massive letters, it's the typical stuff where it's quoting laws and all the typical nonsense that you would see. And I remember we sat down with Steve one day, and he's like, listen, I'm paraphrasing. He's like, listen, you guys are kind of clowns. You don't need to write all that stuff. It's like, you don't need to tell us what the laws are. We already know what they are. You don't need to, threaten or to quote case law. Doesn't matter. And then he went on to explain essentially what you just explained. Just put in there whatever the problem is with the account in as little language as you possibly can. A couple of sentences are going to be fine, and it's going to go through the same process anyway. And the funny thing was, because so many people in the credit repair space are like I said earlier, in this echo chamber where all they're getting is information from other people who are in this space, not necessarily from people who are experts in the field. And so there's some like natural resistance to doing anything that's other than what you've been trained to do. But we ended up doing it, and it was no different. I mean, it was the same. We got verification right there that, wow, we don't have to send a 20-page dispute letter when a 3-page letter is going to do the exact same thing.
Yeah, and you know what I think I think to some extent those letters are less about the credit bureaus, and they're more about selling the credit repair service to the consumer. Hey, look,
100%. 100%.
Look at this package. Look at this package of case law I'm going to hammer the credit bureaus with.
Yeah.
Look at this. Wow, I better hire this credit repair company is definitely doing something different than that credit repair company. I'm going to hire them. I don't. It doesn't have anything to do with the credit bureaus. It has more to do, I think, with selling the service to the consumer. We send letters that quote case law.
Yeah. You know what? And that's not even just a suspicion on your part. That's 100% true. And I'll give you an example of one of the things that we have occasionally even still have a little bit of a problem with, but initially, like if you see a Credit Versio dispute letter, it is very, very Spartan. It's like 2 sentences. What the account number, what the problem is. Now, if somebody wants to write a custom dispute in there, then they can go they can go to a limited degree. They can't write like a novel. But when the software finds problems for them, it's such a short letter that we used to get people writing in and commenting like, no, this can't work at all. This is you're not quoting the law. I'm like, well, you don't need, and it's hard to explain to people because they've also been indoctrinated by credit repair companies. They probably had, who knows, somebody else before that did the exact same thing that you're talking about, is like, look what we do. We have these massive letters, and who can say no to these letters? And this is why we're charging you $150 a month, or, $3,000 to do your credit repair, because, I mean, come on now, look at this. This is impressive work. But at the end of the day, it's just simplicity is really the rule, and that's all that you need.
Yeah, what was the movie A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson? Remember the scene when they were in court where Demi Moore said, "I object," and it was overruled, and she said, "No, I strenuously object." And during one of the breaks, one of the other attorneys, "Is that how it works? I strenuously object."
Kevin Pollak is there. He's like, well, now that you said strenuously, then let's take a look at it.
That's the credit repair equivalent of sending a 10-page dispute letter instead of sending a 1-page dispute. No, I really, really dispute this.
Yeah.
I really dispute, and I'm going to prove it by sending you 12 pages instead of 4 pages. I dispute it 3 times as much because I'm sending 3. So no, So anyway, I don't know why we're going off on this to the extent that.
Yeah, I know. In fact, we got a good group here tonight, and I didn't say this in the beginning of the video, but listen, John and I can go off on these subjects for a while. We hope we're, educating you and entertaining you at the same time. But this is your time. So if you have a question about, anything, as long as it's not specific to, how do I get something deleted from my credit report? If you have a question about anything that's credit related, feel free to post. We'll stop what we're doing and we'll be more than happy to answer the question for you. That's what we're here for. But
the answer to how to get something deleted is write a 12-page letter. Right? I mean, the odds are better if you write a 12-page letter than if you write a 2-page
strenuously
letter.
object.
That's right.
And use the word strenuously.
Deceive this item. So
anyway, the first thing.
Yeah.
So we say no credit repair questions, and that's the first question we get. So whoever this is, if you want an answer to this, if you were on Facebook, I could swing around and I could answer this for you. But unfortunately, after we do a Facebook Live, or YouTube Live, excuse me, I don't see the comments anymore. So if you want to send your question, either post it on our Facebook page or send it to support@creditversio.com. Be more than happy to answer that for you. Okay. So yeah, John. So I think we tackled the 15.3. See, I remembered it. I thought it was going to fall out of this side of my head. I would never remember it again, but I'm holding on to it at least until the end of this live, and then we don't have to discuss the 15.3.
Yeah, and look, by next week, the article that this reporter, remember I told you the reason I'm bringing this up is because this reporter reached out, and he's writing an article about it. When the article is published, I will send it to you, and you can either post it in somewhere, or we can post it here, and you can see kind of a report. And reporters obviously are supposed to be neutral on these kinds of things, where I don't have to be neutral as a source for an interview. I can give my opinion on things, and so it'll be interesting to see versus like one of these other articles that have been written about it, which were clearly written by people who don't understand credit or were trying to pimp a product. This guy is writing an article that should be pretty much down the middle, and he's just going to call balls and strikes as he sees it. So we'll post it, assuming that it's live the next time we do one of these Facebook Lives. We'll post it, and you can read it for yourself and see how it's covered by a legitimate journalist who's researching this novel idea that's floating around out there.
Yeah. Well, like you and I have discussed on numerous occasions. In fact, before we went live, we were having this discussion that based on what a lot of people think are going to be some economic changes coming up in the U.S., that we're probably going to see the credit repair space expand in some way or another. Hopefully just in time for TSR, which that's another conversation, which I'm very much looking forward to. I think that's a very necessary thing. And anything that brings about more compliance and more protection to the public, I'm absolutely in favor for. But I don't think that this is going to be the last of the crazy gimmicky things that we're going to see. And
yeah, if you remember, if I do, and for those of you who've been around for a while, if you remember what happened in the wake of the 08, 09 meltdown, you had basically every mortgage broker was out of work because mortgages were not happening. And not a lot of them, but a lot of new credit repair companies that were formed around that time frame were started by people who had background and experience in the credit environment, and a lot of them came from the mortgage environment, right? Because
no doubt,
employed, they had a knowledge base about credit, and so a natural byproduct of that was perhaps going into the credit repair world. Well, COVID, and I don't know that mortgages seem like they're still pretty popular, but you're right, is you tend to have this kind of weird influx. And I don't know if it's correlation or coincidence. I'm not going to say that it's one or the other. It's at the very least, it's a coincidence, but it possibly could be a legitimate correlation. So you end up with all these new people who are in the industry. And so one of the things that I always ask the organizer of CreditCon, and for those of you who are watching who don't know what I'm talking about, it's an annual event, usually in Las Vegas, and a guy named Matt Listro puts on this event, and it's called CreditCon, and there's hundreds of people there that go to this thing, and there's 2 or 3 days of presentations about credit and such. And I speak at it a couple times, and there's a bunch of other industry people who speak at it. And one of the things that I always ask Matt on day one before I go up on the stage for anything is, hey, tell me about the audience. Am I talking to a bunch of veterans, or am I talking to a bunch of people who are new to the industry? Because based on that, I change my presentation. So if it's a bunch of veterans, I don't do basic stuff. I do more advanced stuff. If it's a bunch of newbies, I don't touch the advanced stuff because they have no idea what I'm talking about. I go very, very basic. Well, this past CreditCon, there were a ton of people that it was the first time they'd been there, and a ton of people that were new to the credit repair space. So it seems like what you are saying is playing out, at the very least, in the attendance of what is probably the largest credit repair related event that happens every year. Is it now we have a lot of new folks who are in the industry, and that's fine. I'm not being critical of that. But what I am saying is that it's a very different knowledge base for someone like you versus someone who's been in the industry for 6 months, right? And so it's important that people who are running any business, whether it's credit repair or landscaping or accounting or car repair, that they get information from reputable sources, so the services that they provide are actually good services, and that they comply with the various laws. And when you start pimping products and services that are flat out either that they're false, which is called a lie, versus you're negligently pushing a product, and so you probably should have known that it was false. That's when you start getting in trouble. And respectfully, that's why we have a Credit Repair Organizations Act, because you have bad actors who are in this business, and so you have to have a consumer protection statute to protect them from things like billing in advance, dishonesty, misrepresentation, deceptive marketing. And that's also why you have a CFPB and a Federal Trade Commission that is actively trying to shut down a lot of these companies. And the CFPB, you can make a pretty good argument that they're trying to shut down the industry with this whole TSR thing. So, and when you start throwing a bunch of newbies into the mix, it's almost like chum to the sharks, right? They don't know what they don't know, and so they're more likely to make mistakes and be more aggressive with their marketing language because they're trying to build a business. And in the credit repair world, which I'm not in, thankfully, in the credit repair world, saying things that are aggressive is a bad deal, because you're probably saying something that's wrong, which is putting you in an adverse position to state or federal law, and then that's not a good way to run a business, obviously.
Yeah. Well, also too, I think, John, one of the takeaways, we can harp on the credit repair space, all day long for a variety of reasons. But really what this all comes back to, and I think one of the reasons why, or I know one of the reasons why you participate in this, is the connection to Credit Versio is, well, hey, listen, use the software, don't use the software. It's up to you. But this should be done by the individual. This is something, a repair, a dispute process, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it. You can get templates from the FTC website, the CFPB website. There's templates there. You should never buy templates from anybody. Credit Versio is a great source for. I mean, you can get templates free from Credit Versio. But the point I'm trying to make is that this is really not a very complicated process. If you have legitimate grievances, you have disputes, you have something that you need to remedy. Yeah, it can be a little bit confusing. You out? All right. It can be a little bit confusing, but that's my partner David taking off. But largely people kind of know what's up with their credit report. Like if there's something that's legitimately wrong, yeah, it says I'm late, but I wasn't late. That's pretty straightforward. There's a mistake here. I just need to let them know, and it shouldn't be very complex.
That's a three sentence dispute letter. Hey, Equifax, right. Do you see this Wells Fargo account that shows that I was late twice? I wasn't ever late. Can you please correct it? Love, John. That's it. It's a 3-line dispute letter. It doesn't require 7 pages. I don't have to quote their obligations under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. I can assure you they know what they are. And I don't need to stick my stamp on the envelope upside down. That's not going to change anything. So that's really all you need to do. The credit bureaus, they just need a reasonable person has to be able to read and understand your dispute. So if you write your dispute and all you're saying is something to the effect of, my credit report is loaded with inaccuracies, please fix them. A reasonable person could not interpret that dispute because they don't have any idea what you're talking about. Is it what on their 30-page credit report are you referring to?
Yeah.
So as long as your communication is a reasonable person could interpret it, then that's really all you need to do. And the bar is really low. This Wells Fargo account is wrong. I was never late. Please fix it. You've identified it. You've said what's wrong. You clearly have asked them to do something about it. And that's it. A reasonable person, including someone from a CRA, knows exactly what you're asking for and knows what to do with it from there.
One thing, I don't know if I told you this, John, and this is for you and also for those who are watching, to the degree that you're interested in the space of helping people fix their credit. One of the things, John, that's fascinating right now, I think that TSR, and for you watching, TSR is the telemarketing and sales rule, and it has a lot of restrictions that apply to the debt consolidation industry about 10 years ago. It really wiped out about 70% of the players in the space, all in the name of consumer protection, which was a good thing. It remains to be seen if that's coming to the credit repair industry, but most people who are professional in this space are preparing for it. It doesn't apply to Credit Versio because we're not a credit repair company. We don't provide credit repair services, but it's going to be a very big thing. And John, one thing I think that you'll find pretty fascinating is, I can't name specific names at the moment, but there are massive credit repair companies that we're talking to right now. I mean, they do thousands of enrollments every month that are wanting us to build their software to replace what they're using because they want to get out of the doing the credit repair side of it. They want to empower the client to do it themselves. So they would rather focus more on other services, mortgage, consulting, consolidation, things like that, and step away from writing the letters and sending the letters and playing that role for people, rather than giving them a platform that's their own, that's more like a white label Credit Versio, and just like, here, client, just do it yourself, print them yourself, mail them yourself, you take control over the process. It's not that hard. We have software now that'll kind of walk you through the whole process if you need that. So I think that's actually a very fascinating transition that we're watching. A couple, actually there's 3 very big companies that we're talking to right now that want to go that route.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that you're, and I think the phrase that's often used is taking advantage of the most vulnerable consumers. That's how the victims of some of these schemes are portrayed, as that they're vulnerable and you're taking advantage of their vulnerability. Okay, which sounds really bad, right? I mean, you're taking advantage of someone at a time when they're the most vulnerable. Yeah. And to the extent that whatever you're offering to somebody is free, it's hard to argue that you're taking advantage of them if what you're offering them doesn't cost them any money. And if you read, which is one of the reasons I've always thought that even though you smell like a credit repair company. You're not really a credit repair company because you don't charge the consumer for anything, right? And if you read CROA, that's in the definition of a credit repair company. It's right in there, in exchange for valuable consideration. Well, if no one's paying you anything, then it's kind of hard to argue that you're getting valuable consideration. And I've seen opinions written by large law firms on that very issue, and they seem to agree that if the consumer isn't paying a company to do credit repair on their behalf, then the company is not a credit repair company. They're something else, but they're not a credit repair company.
Right. Yeah, we tried to get a legal opinion from the attorney that actually is very popular in the space. You would probably know who he is, or at least know some of his clients. But he was said the same thing. He's like, I'm not comfortable writing a legal opinion because there are some cases where even some credit monitoring companies have been sued for violation of CROA, just because that's some of the language that they use. He goes, but you guys are as close as it can get without much of a question. Yeah. But so John, we went off on a tangent here. Yeah, we are 52 minutes. And, we didn't really take any questions today. John and I just went off on the 15-3 rule, and I hope that was very informative. Hopefully this gets some traction. John, when that article comes out, hopefully this isn't a thing that makes its rounds and becomes, almost viral like the Metro 2 compliance that we had to debunk a little while back. But for anybody who's watching this on a replay, if you have any questions, feel free to post them. I get notifications, and I'm more than happy to answer those for you. John, a wealth of information. Thank you again so much for walking everybody through the 15-3 rule today. And I guess it's not going to be 800 credit scores for everybody with this new thing. But at least we understand what it is. And, once again, you're able to debunk something that people ought to steer clear of.
Yes, absolutely. The fastest 52 minutes on the internet.
No doubt. Okay. John, again, thank you very much. Our viewers, thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.